My name is Diana. I'm 30 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've lived alone in a modest rented apartment downtown. To some people, it might look plain white walls, creaky floors, secondhand furniture left by the landlord, but to me, it's freedom. I work in customer service for an insurance company. It isn't glamorous, but it pays the bills, and after spending all day handling other people's problems, nothing soothes me more than coming home, locking the door, and sinking into silence. Silence to me is golden. It's the only thing that has ever felt like mine. That's why I still remember that Tuesday evening so vividly. I'd just gotten home from work, made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, and settled into my couch to stream a show. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the neighbor's cat purring through the thin walls. For the first time in weeks, I was thinking I might even draw a bath later, light a candle, let myself relax. Then the doorbell rang. At first, I ignored it. My friends always text before they come, and the building manager, Mrs. Chen, calls if she needs me. But the bell rang again, more insistent this time, breaking into my sanctuary. I walked to the door, annoyed, and pressed my eye against the peephole. What I saw almost made me stumble backward. My parents, Linda and Bob, were standing there with two enormous suitcases, grinning like kids who'd just won the lottery. When I opened the door, the smell of their perfume and aftershave rushed in, already making the apartment feel smaller. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" Before I could even invite them in, Mom pushed past me, dragging one suitcase across my floor. "Surprise," she said, her tone cheerful but also final, as if she had rehearsed this line. Dad followed. With the other suitcase, his face lit with the same grin. "We're moving in, kiddo," he said casually, like announcing dinner plans. I froze. For a moment, it was as if I'd slipped into someone else's dream. My brain tried to make sense of his words. "Moving in here. What do you mean?" I asked slowly. "What happened to your house?" Mom plopped herself onto my couch as if she had always lived here. She leaned back, hands behind her head, her smile stretching. "Oh, we gave that to Janice and Mark. They need it more than we do. With all those kids, they were practically suffocating in that tiny apartment." Her tone was casual, but there was something sharp beneath it, a defensive edge, as if daring me to object. I blinked. My older sister Janice, with her 3 children and her constant need for attention, had always been the center of my parents' world. But this, giving her the family home, just like that. "How temporary are we talking?" I asked, my voice tightening, despite my effort to stay calm. "Just a month," Dad said, already scanning the room like he was rearranging it in his head. "Maybe 2. Until we find a nice rental. You wouldn't kick your parents out on the street, would you?" His words carried weight. Not just a question, but a test. The kind of guilt-drenched trap I knew too well. I rubbed my temples. My apartment wasn't big, just 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room that barely fit my couch and dining table. "I'll need to ask Mrs. Chen if that's even allowed," I said. Dad gave me a look, a mixture of amusement and irritation, as if I'd just told him I needed permission to breathe. "You always worry too much," he muttered. Still, I retreated to my bedroom, closed the door, and called Mrs. Chen. Her voice was calm as always. "As long as they don't cause trouble, Diana, it should be fine. You're a good tenant. I trust you." When I returned to the living room, the scene had already shifted. Dad was sprawled in my chair with the remote, flipping through channels, as if searching for his rightful throne. Mom was in my kitchen, rummaging through cabinets with the same energy she used to inspect clearance racks at the mall. "My landlord says it's fine," I murmured. "Of course it is," Mom said, her voice muffled by the cabinet door. "We're lovely people." She pulled out a box of pasta and grinned. "Now what's for dinner? I'm starving." I looked down at my half-eaten sandwich on the plate. I wasn't planning on cooking tonight. "Don't worry about it," Mom said, already filling a pot with water. "I'll make something. Do you have any pasta?" And just like that, my quiet evening disappeared. I sat at my own dining table, chewing mechanically on the sandwich, while Mom stirred sauce and Dad complained about the lack of sports channels on my cable package. I tried to smile, tried to convince myself this would be temporary, maybe even fun. But deep down, a tightness had already coiled in my stomach. "This is going to be fun," Mom said brightly, twirling spaghetti on her fork once we sat down. "Like a month-long sleepover." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, fun." But as I watched them settle into my space with a comfort that felt rehearsed, a single thought whispered in the back of my mind like a warning I couldn't ignore. When my parents get comfortable somewhere, they never leave. The first week with my parents wasn't terrible. In fact, I almost convinced myself it might work out. Mom cooked dinner most nights, filling the apartment with smells of garlic and onions, sautéing in olive oil, aromas I hadn't realized I'd missed since leaving home. Dad even fixed the leaky faucet in my bathroom, grunting proudly as if he'd just saved me thousands in repair costs. For a while it felt manageable. But I know my parents. Their generosity always comes with an expiration date. It began subtly. One Wednesday evening, I came home to find a note on the counter in Mom's neat handwriting, leftovers in the fridge. Make something for yourself. I'm tired. I shrugged it off. Everyone gets tired. The next night, same thing. By Friday, she didn't even leave a note, just a sink full of dishes and silence. When I asked her about it, she didn't even look up from painting her nails on my couch. Mom, I thought we were eating dinner together tonight. I'm too tired to cook for you every day, Diana, she said with a sigh, blowing on her freshly painted nails. You're young. You can handle yourself. Her tone was light, but there was something pointed underneath. Then, almost without pause, she stood and moved toward the kitchen. I followed, confused. She pulled out pots and pans, humming, and began making Dad's favorite stew, perfectly seasoned, the kind of meal that takes effort. I stood in the doorway, my mouth dry. So, you're cooking for him? Mom shot me a quick glance. Of course. He needs a proper meal with his back problems. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. That word always felt like a knife. I didn't argue, but I felt the shift. I wasn't the daughter she was cooking for anymore. I was just the extra person who happened to live here. The imbalance grew quickly. One night, after another long shift of dealing with irate customers on the phone, I came home to find my sister Janice's 3 kids, Tommy 8, Sarah 6, and little Jake 4, running wild in my living room. They had juice boxes in their hands and crumbs all over my rug. Janice asked me to watch them. Mom called from the kitchen, though when I stepped in, she was already sliding on her coat. Wait, what? Where are you going? Just a quick errand. You don't mind, do you? I stared at her, incredulous. Actually, but the door slammed shut before I could finish. I turned back to the kids. Jake had climbed onto my coffee table, stomping like it was a stage. Sarah had discovered my laptop and was mashing keys with sticky fingers. Hey, I rushed forward, grabbing the laptop away. This isn't a toy. But Grandma said we could watch cartoons, Sarah pouted, folding her arms. Well, Grandma's not here, I muttered, setting the laptop out of reach. By the time Janice arrived hours later, I was frazzled. My work half done, my nerves shredded. She breezed in like nothing was wrong, scooping Jake into her arms. Thanks for helping out, sis. You're a lifesaver. I forced a smile, but my voice shook. I didn't agree to babysit Janice. She tilted her head, amused. Oh, come on. It's just family helping family. Don't make such a fuss. Family helping family. It was always her favorite line, a convenient excuse for dumping her responsibilities on me. That became the new normal. The kids came over more often sometimes without warning. I'd be in the middle of a conference call, and suddenly Tommy would be hollering into a toy megaphone while Sarah and Jake fought over the TV remote. Can you keep it down? I'd whisper harshly, covering my microphone. We're just playing, Tommy would shout louder. Even the neighbors started giving me looks in the hallway. One leaned over his balcony and muttered, "Daycare center in there." I wanted to sink into the floor. Groceries became another battleground. I used to shop once a week, milk, eggs, vegetables, some snacks. But with my parents eating freely and Janice's kids raiding everything, my fridge was bare by Wednesday. One night I opened the fridge and found nothing but a lone jar of pickles and an empty juice box on its side. I slammed the door harder than I meant to. Janice, I snapped the next day when she dropped the kids off again. Your children are eating me out of house and home. She rolled her eyes. They're kids, Diana. Kids get hungry. That's normal. But I'm buying food for 2 people, not 5 plus 3 kids who show up every other day. You're being dramatic again. She kissed Jake's head and handed me his backpack like a peace offering. Relax. It's just food. I wanted to scream. Easy for her to say she wasn't the one swiping her credit card at the store twice a week, watching her savings dip lower and lower. The tension with my parents worsened. I tried bringing up rent casually at first. You know, I said one evening, utilities have gone up since you moved in. Maybe we could figure out a way to split. Dad cut me off, his voice weary. You know my back keeps me from working, Diana. And your mom's not in shape to take a job either. You really want to nickel and dime your parents. Mom chimed in, her voice trembling with mock hurt. After everything we've sacrificed for you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. They had me cornered again, like always. Any protest turned into guilt. Later that night, I overheard them whispering in the guest room. She'll manage, Mom said softly. She always does. That's why we can count on her. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand on the wall, feeling as though it might crumble beneath me. They weren't just visiting, they were settling. The next morning, I stumbled into the living room to find my laptop sitting open on the coffee table. The screen was covered in greasy fingerprints, and there was a faint ring of juice on the wood beneath it. A chill ran down my spine. I had no proof, but in that moment, I knew something was coming. Something that would push me past the point of no return. And the terrifying part, a small secret voice inside me whispered that maybe that was exactly what I needed. The weeks blurred into a pattern of chaos. My once quiet apartment, my sanctuary, had become a noisy crossroads where no one respected boundaries. Every day felt like a reminder that my life was no longer mine. The groceries vanished faster than I could stock them. I'd planned meals only to come home and find the fridge raided, the snack boxes ripped open, and the milk carton half empty with sticky fingerprints around the cap. The noise was relentless, too. When I worked from home, Tommy blasted cartoons at full volume. Sarah practiced her shrill princess songs, and Jake ran laps around the living room, screaming like a siren. I tried noise-canceling headphones, but even through them, I heard the pounding, the laughter, the crying. The frustration built until it finally erupted one Thursday evening. I had just ended a grueling conference call when I noticed my laptop sitting on the coffee table. The glow of the screen was faint, and a wet stain spread beneath it. My stomach dropped. I rushed forward and lifted the laptop. Juice dripped out of its ports, sticky and warm. The smell of fruit punch hit me. My heart thudded in my chest as I jabbed the power button. Nothing. The screen remained black. "Who touched this?" I demanded, spinning toward the room. Mom sat on the couch watching TV, a magazine open in her lap. She didn't look surprised, just guilty. "Oh, that," she said, casually flipping a page. "The children were bored, so I let them watch cartoons on your computer." I stared at her, stunned. "You what?" She avoided my eyes. They spilled some juice. It was an accident. The kids stood frozen in the corner, eyes wide. Jake clutched an empty cup like evidence of a crime. "An accident." My voice trembled with fury. "This is a $1 and $200 laptop. I need it for work." Before Mom could answer, Janice walked in, perfectly timed as always. She scooped up Jake, smoothing his hair. "What's going on?" "Your kids destroyed my laptop," I snapped. "I need you to replace it." Janice rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with patronizing calm. "Oh, come on, Diana. Kids break things. It's just what happens in families." "Just what happens," I repeated, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea what this costs? I can't work without it." "Look, I'd help if I could, but—" "Money's tight right now," she said, adjusting her purse strap like she was already done with the conversation. "Besides, it was just an accident. Don't be so dramatic." There it was again. Dramatic. The word my family used, to dismiss me, to erase my feelings like chalk on a board. Tears of rage burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. "Get out," I said, my voice low and shaking. Janice frowned, offended. "Excuse me. You heard me. Take your kids and leave." She huffed, gathering her children with exaggerated sighs. "Unbelievable. You've always been so ungrateful, Diana. We're family. You don't throw family out over a little accident." The door clicked shut behind her, and silence fell for the first time that day. I sank onto the floor beside my dead laptop, the weight of it pressing into my chest. That night, I sat in the dark with only the hum of the fridge to keep me company. I thought about my savings account, the one I'd carefully built for 7 years, dollar by dollar, dreaming of someday buying a house of my own. I had never touched that fund, not once. But now, because of Janice's children and my parents' negligence, I had no choice. I would have to dip into it to replace the laptop. As I transferred the money online, my hands shook. I felt violated, stripped of something I had guarded for years. It wasn't just the laptop they destroyed. It was my progress, my independence, my safety net. I sat back staring at the ceiling. A memory surfaced me at 16, begging my parents to buy me a secondhand car so I could drive to a part-time job. They said no, that I was too young to handle that responsibility. 6 months later, Janice turned 16, and they surprised her with a used Honda Civic wrapped in a giant red bow. Favoritism, always favoritism. That night, the walls of my apartment seemed to close in on me. Every corner of the room whispered with reminders, Mom's slippers kicked off by the couch, Dad's pill bottles lined neatly by the TV, sticky fingerprints smeared on the fridge handle. My sanctuary had been taken piece by piece until I could no longer find myself in it. By Saturday, the tension had reached a breaking point. I walked in from the store, arms loaded with grocery bags, only to find Tommy bouncing on my couch like a trampoline while Sarah scribbled on the walls with a red crayon. "Stop!" I shouted, dropping the bags. "That's my furniture. That's my wall." The kids froze, wide-eyed. Mom appeared from the guest room, her tone icy. "Diana, they're just children. Stop yelling at them." "Just children. They're destroying my home." "Your home." She arched a brow. "This is all temporary. Don't act like it's a palace." The words hit harder than I expected. Temporary. That's how she saw me, too. Someone whose space didn't matter, someone who could be erased for the sake of convenience. That night, lying awake, I realized something chilling. I wasn't just losing control of my apartment. I was losing myself. I was no longer Diana, the woman who loved her quiet life. I was the stand-in babysitter, the extra wallet, the invisible daughter. And the scariest part, a part of me suspected they had planned it this way all along. Give Janice the house dump themselves on me, lean on my savings until I broke. As the thought coiled tighter in my chest, one truth solidified: I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. It was late October when everything finally boiled over. I had been clinging to the thought of my upcoming vacation for months, 2 full weeks away from the endless calls, the complaints, the chaos. I imagined mornings of sleeping and afternoons of baking, evenings of books and bubble baths. Just me, my silence, and the freedom I hadn't felt in so long. But the night before my vacation began, I came home to find my apartment in chaos. Jake was crying in his corner, clutching a broken toy car. Sarah was jumping on my couch, shrieking with glee, and Tommy had commandeered my television, playing video games at full blast. My grocery bags from the morning were already torn open, snacks scattered across the table like confetti after a parade. And there by the door sat 2 enormous suitcases. "What's going on?" I demanded, setting my bag on the counter. Mom and Dad emerged from the hallway, both dressed neatly, their faces glowing with excitement. "Great news," Dad announced, pulling on his jacket. "We're going to Florida with Janice and Mark. A whole week at the resort. Sun, palm trees, the works." My stomach dropped. "That's nice," I said cautiously. "Have fun." "Oh, but the kids are staying here with you," Mom added, as casually as if she were asking me to water her plants. I blinked. "What?" "They can't miss school," she said, adjusting her earrings in the mirror. "So they'll stay here with you. Perfect timing, since you're on vacation anyway." "No." The word slipped out before I could stop it. Mom froze her lipstick halfway to her lips. Dad frowned, confusion furrowing his brows. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I didn't agree to this. I'm not watching 3 kids for an entire week." Dad's voice hardened. "It's not babysitting Diana, it's family. You're their aunt. You'll manage." Manage, my voice trembled with anger. "This is my vacation, my time. You can't just dump them on me like I don't have a choice." Mom's face reddened, her eyes wet with sudden tears. "Diana, we've been planning this trip for months. You know how hard it is for us to get away. Please don't ruin this for us." The guilt hit like a punch to the gut, sharp and familiar. This was how it always went, my needs eclipsed by theirs, my voice drowned by their disappointment. But this time something inside me snapped. "Your months of planning and you're only telling me now," I hissed. "You never even asked. You just assumed I'd do it, like you always do." "Don't be selfish," Dad snapped. "You have no husband, no kids, no real obligations. Who else can do it?" "No real obligations," I whispered. My hands shook not from fear, but from rage. "Do you hear yourself?" The kids had gone quiet, sensing the storm in the room. Their wide eyes flickered between us. Tiny witnesses to a history of patterns I was finally breaking. I turned to my parents, my voice rising. "You gave your house to Janice without a word to me. You moved into my apartment without asking. You eat my food, drain my savings, let her kids destroy my things. And now you expect me to give up the 1 week I've been looking forward to for myself, and I'm selfish." Mom's tears spilled over. "We're your parents. We thought we raised you better than this." "Raised me better," I laughed bitterly. "You raised me to be the backup plan, the safety net, the one who sacrifices so Janice doesn't have to. But I'm done." For the first time, silence hung heavy between us. My parents stared at me as if I'd just spoken a language they couldn't understand. Dad was the first to break it. "You'll change your mind," he said flatly, tugging at his suitcase handle. "You always do." And he was right until now, I always had. But that night, lying in bed while the children finally slept in the next room, I stared at the ceiling and felt the walls pressing in on me. Something had shifted. A line had been crossed. I couldn't keep living like this. When the apartment fell into silence, I reached for my phone. My fingers trembled as I typed out a message to a realtor I found online, one based in Virginia, a state far enough away to feel like freedom, but close enough to make escape plausible. Hello, my name is Diana. I need help relocating. Quickly. I hesitated before hitting send, fear and excitement twisting in my gut. Then I pressed the button. The reply came the next morning, a polite professional message with a list of available properties and an offer to set up virtual tours. As I sat there sipping coffee while the kids argued in the background, I realized something. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a spark of control, a flicker of power. They thought they had me trapped, but they had no idea I was already planning my escape. When my parents returned from Florida, their skin sun-kissed and arms heavy with shopping bags, they looked more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. They breezed into my apartment, chatting about poolside cocktails and palm trees, completely oblivious to the storm simmering inside me. We had such a wonderful time, Mom announced, dropping a seashell-shaped souvenir onto my dining table as if it excused everything. That's nice, I said flatly, not bothering to hide my disinterest. They exchanged a glance, but neither pressed me. Why would they? In their minds, I was still the compliant daughter who always bent under pressure. But while they boasted about beachside buffets and resort spas, I was already 2 steps ahead. My mind wasn't in that apartment anymore. It was in Virginia, where a realtor named Susan had sent me listings of small, quiet houses tucked away on tree-lined streets. I lied easily now. I'm visiting a college friend for a few days, I told them when I drove out to tour homes. Emily existed technically an old classmate who lived somewhere in Virginia, but I had no plans to see her. Instead, I spent those days with Susan walking through homes that smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. The first house was too close to a busy street, the noise constant even behind shut windows. But the second was perfect. A small 2-bedroom cottage with pale yellow siding, a tidy front yard, and a backdrop of whispering woods. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The peace, the stillness, the promise of finally being alone. I want this one, I whispered, running my hand along the cool banister. Susan smiled knowingly. Then let's make it yours. The next week was a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet exhilaration. The seller accepted my offer quickly. Her mother had moved into a nursing home, and she wanted a fast sale. My mortgage application was rushed through with surprising ease, almost as if the universe itself wanted me out of that suffocating apartment. Meanwhile, I played my role at home. Each morning I got up and made coffee as usual, listening to Dad grumble about his back or Mom sigh about how tired she was. Each afternoon I logged into work calls, my voice steady, even as my heart pounded with the weight of secrets. At night, after everyone was asleep, I crept into my room, sliding documents and bank statements into a folder I kept hidden in the closet. The hardest part was pretending. When Janice dropped off her kids unannounced, I forced a smile even as I mentally calculated how many nights remained before closing. When my parents complained about their ailments, I nodded sympathetically, all while imagining them far away, nowhere near my doorstep. Every time I packed a box under cover of darkness, my nerves sizzled. I started with books easy to explain if anyone noticed, since I could say I was decluttering. Then clothes, then small kitchen items. Slowly, carefully, I chipped away at my life in that apartment until my room looked hollow, less like home, and more like a waiting room. Mrs. Chen, my landlord, was the only one I trusted with the truth. I called her privately, my voice low. I'll be moving out, I told her. But I'd like to pay for 2 more months so my parents have time to find a place of their own. There was a pause, and then her kind voice warmed my chest. That is very generous of you, Diana. Not many would do the same. Generous? The word felt strange, considering I didn't feel generous at all. I felt desperate. But maybe generosity was the only way to ease the guilt that still threatened to drown me some nights. The more my plan solidified, the more paranoia crept in. Every time Mom knocked on my door unexpectedly, I froze, convinced she'd caught me packing. Every time Dad shuffled through the mail, I feared he'd find a letter from the bank. I even started locking my bedroom door, pretending it was because I needed privacy for work calls. One evening, while I folded clothes into a suitcase, I caught myself listening for footsteps in the hallway, my heart hammering at every creak of the floorboards. Living with them while plotting my escape felt like sleeping beside a wild animal you never knew when it might wake and lash out. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had become the one sneaking around, the one lying and keeping secrets. But for once, it wasn't to protect them. It was to protect myself. 3 weeks after I made the offer, Susan called me with the words I had been waiting for. We can close on Friday. I nearly cried with relief. That same week, Janice invited me to a party at her house, one of Mark's friends' birthdays, apparently. My parents were thrilled already, fussing over what to wear, eager for an evening of laughter and free wine. "You're coming, right?" Janice asked over the phone. "I don't think so." I lied smoothly. "I'm tired. I'll probably just stay in." She tutted, disappointed. "Suit yourself. We'll have fun without you." Perfect. The moment my parents left for that party, my plan would snap into action. The movers I'd hired in secret were scheduled for 8 o'clock sharp. I had already packed everything I owned into boxes stacked neatly in my room. To anyone else, it looked like clutter. To me, it was freedom in cardboard form. I rehearsed the steps in my head over and over. Movers arrive. Load everything. Quickly leave behind only the furniture that belonged to Mrs. Chen. Then one last look, one final note on the kitchen table, and I'd be gone before my parents ever returned. The night before the move, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. My parents' muffled laughter drifted down the hallway as they watched television, completely unaware that by this time tomorrow, their world would tilt upside down. For the first time in years, I felt something close to exhilaration. Tomorrow, I thought, clutching the edge of my blanket. Tomorrow, I'll finally be free. The evening of the party arrived like a storm I had been tracking for weeks. My parents bustled around the apartment, arguing playfully about who looked better in their outfits. Mom adjusted her pearl earrings in the mirror, while Dad smoothed down his shirt, humming with unusual cheer. "Don't wait up," Mom called, grabbing her purse. "We'll be late." I forced a smile, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. "Have fun." The moment the door shut, the air shifted. Silence stretched across the apartment, thick with possibility. For the first time in months, I was truly alone, but not for long. At exactly 8:00 p.m., the movers arrived. 3 men in navy uniforms, efficient and wordless. They knocked once, then got to work as if they understood the urgency written all over my face. "Everything in here," I whispered, pointing to the boxes stacked neatly in my bedroom. They moved quickly, lifting, carrying, stacking. Each thud of a box against the truck sent a thrill through my chest. With every item that left the apartment, I felt lighter, freer. By 10 hosiery, the rooms were bare. The furniture Mrs. Chen's remained behind, but my life had been stripped clean from the space. No clothes in the closet, no books on the shelf, no photographs on the nightstand. It was as if I had never been there at all. I left a single envelope on the kitchen table, inside a note in my handwriting. "Mom and Dad, I bought a house in Virginia and I'm moving tonight. You have 2 months to stay here while you find your own place. I've already paid the rent. Do not try to follow me. I need space and I need peace. Diana." I stood in the middle of the empty living room, breathing in the silence. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was relief so sharp it almost hurt. Then I closed the door, locked it for the last time, and walked away. The drive to Virginia stretched long into the night. My car was packed with essentials, clothes, documents, a few sentimental items I hadn't dared ship with the movers. The highway unfurled before me, dark and endless, my headlights carving out a narrow path. My phone buzzed endlessly in the cup holder. Calls from Mom, Dad, Janice. Text messages stacking like bricks. "Where are you? Answer us. This isn't funny. How could you do this?" I ignored them all. For once, I didn't owe anyone an answer. By the time I pulled into my new driveway, dawn was breaking. Pale light spilled over the yellow siding of the cottage, and the woods behind it whispered in the wind. Exhausted, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The rooms were empty, but they didn't feel hollow. They felt full of possibility. I inflated an air mattress in what would be my bedroom and collapsed onto it, surrounded by silence so deep it wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. The days that followed were a blur of unpacking and reclaiming myself. The movers delivered my boxes, and I slowly rebuilt my life. One book on the shelf, one mug in the cabinet, one photograph on the wall. But the calls didn't stop, my phone filled with voicemails. Mom's voice trembling with confusion. "Diana, honey, we came home and found your note. Please call us. We don't understand." Then anger. "How could you do this to us? We're your parents. You can't just abandon us." Dad's voice was sharper, laced with venom. "This is cruel. Selfish. We raised you better than this." Janice's texts were the worst. Ungrateful. Heartless. "After everything Mom and Dad did for you, this is how you repay them." I deleted each one without listening to the end. For the first time, their guilt had no power over me. Weeks passed. I joined a local book club. I started yoga classes at a small studio downtown. On weekends, I hiked through the woods or sat by the nearby lake watching the ripples dance in the sunlight. My savings account was smaller, but my soul was lighter. For a while, I believed I had escaped completely. Until the day they found me. It was a gray morning 3 months after I'd moved in. I was working in my home office when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Curious, I peered out the window and froze. My parents' car sat in the driveway. My heart slammed against my ribs. How had they found me? Who told them? A knock rattled the front door. Diana Mom's voice rang out desperate and commanding all at once. "We know you're in there. Open the door." Dad's voice followed sharper. "You've got plenty of room in this house. The least you can do is let us in." Panic surged through me, but so did fury. They hadn't listened, hadn't respected my boundaries. They never had. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. "There are people on my property who won't leave," I told the dispatcher, my voice shaking. When the officer arrived, he listened calmly as I explained. Then he turned to my parents. "You'll need to leave," he said firmly. Mom's face crumpled. "But we're her parents." The officer didn't flinch. "She doesn't want you here. That means you go." For several minutes, they argued, pleaded, tried to guilt him, the way they always had with me. But the officer stood firm, and eventually they got back into their car and drove away, their faces pale with disbelief. I watched from the window, my hands trembling, until the taillights disappeared. Months passed before I heard from them again. This time it wasn't direct. My old friend Lisa called her voice hesitant. "Your parents asked me to reach out," she said. "They say they're sorry. They want to make things right. They want you to call them." I closed my eyes, listening to the quiet hum of my new home. Birds chirped outside, the smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, my chest felt light strong. "Tell them I'll contact them when I'm ready," I said softly. "If I'm ever ready." 6 months later, I still haven't called. And the truth, I don't miss them. Not really. I miss the idea of having a family that loved me the way I loved them. But the reality was different, lopsided, draining, unfair. I gave them 2 months of free rent to find a new place. That was more kindness than they ever gave me. And now for the first time, I live the way I always dreamed, quietly, peacefully, on my own terms. Some people call it selfish. I call it survival. I sit on my porch in the evenings, the woods behind me whispering in the breeze, and I breathe. Nobody's yelling. Nobody's taking. Nobody's demanding. Just me, my silence, and the life I fought to reclaim. And for the first time in my adult life, I am truly, irrevocably happy.